What do you think is the best, most persuasive argument from the other side? Like when theonomists say this, it's a lot to, we got to do a lot of work here. I think I have my answer, but I want to hear yours.
I've so convinced myself I have a hard time.
Same here. Well, okay, then
you give it
rhetorically, I think it's the by what standard? By what standard? It's the title of documentaries. I mean, whenever I talk to a theonomist, they keep going, by what standard? So for example, Romans 13, the government is supposed to use the sword to punish evil and therefore in some sense reward the good.
Oh, by what standard?
By what standard?
By God's.
Well,
by the Bible, I would say.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, there you go. That's all I want to do, is I want the nation to recognize that the Bible is the source of what we understand to be good and evil, and therefore I want it to be in our Constitution that the Bible tells us to do that.
To which my response, to go back again and again, this is my answer, and this side seems to utterly fail to recognize, is the idea of limited jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Within its narrow protectionist jurisdiction, yes, by the standard of God and the Scripture, absolutely. That's what I'm going to fight for. But that's not a perfectionist, all-expansive jurisdiction. So in Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2, when we're told by Peter and Paul that the government is to reward the good and punish the bad, is that all good? All bad?
Right.
Every good, every bad imaginable? Is that what they're saying? Right? Well, if so, goodness gracious, well, then the government's got to be God. They got to be able to peer deep into my heart and criminalize every lustful thought. No, it's not all good. It's not all bad. It's a limited set. Well, what's the limited set? How do you establish that jurisdiction?
Well, I think they would say, okay, well, let's take that limited set. How do they even figure that out without special revelation? Would you bring in natural law at that point? Genesis 9, parity principle?
Yeah, I would go back to Genesis 9. I would look at the civil context. That I'd look at how this Noahic covenant in Genesis 9 is then enforced and required of the kings of the nations. Now we quickly go back and look at Israel. Well, it's the church that's standing in Israel's covenantal context.
We are still under the covenant of Genesis 9.
But every nation is under the covenant of Genesis 9.
That's right, yeah.
Sennacherib in Assyria was, Nebuchadnezzar was in Babylon, Pharaoh was.
Mao Zedong in China right now.
And the governments of today are standing in equivalent covenantal positions is the nations of the Old Testament. Well, let's then go to Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, let's go to Amos, let's go to Habakkuk and say, what does God indict the nations for? Does he indict the nations for false, for not acting as the priests of Israel, for not enforcing worship on their people? Well, of course not. He indicts them for violence. He indicts them for putting themselves over him, right?
Yeah.
He says that again and again. You have made yourselves God. And he indicts them for opposing God's people, right? So what I would understand is say, let me use an analogy, an illustration. Babysitters versus parents. A parent has, in a sense, a perfectionist, all-expansive jurisdiction in a child's life. A parent teaches the child how to eat, how to sleep, how to walk, how to wipe themselves, how to worship, how to get along with their sisters, how to marry. Everything, in some sense, falls in a parent's jurisdiction. Well, let's go to the babysitter. Does the babysitter have the same jurisdiction? Well, certainly not. The babysitter's job is like, get the kids to bed on time, keep them out of traffic, and so forth. Well, now let's suppose.
Great analogy.
Well, now let's suppose you have little Johnny. Mom and dad say to babysitter, hey, Johnny needs to be in bed by 8 o'clock. And little Johnny is an unbeliever. Little Johnny says, I don't think mom and dad told you that. Is it the babysitter's job then to enforce belief about mom and dad on little Johnny?
No.
Or, I don't care if you believe that or not, Johnny. You need to be in bed. That's what I'm called to get you in bed by 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's the babysitter's job. Now, does little Johnny's unbelief make it harder? Absolutely. Do you want little Johnny to believe? Absolutely. But you can't make little Johnny believe. You are responsible for getting him to bed at 8 o'clock. That's it.